Here in the greater U Street corridor, this used to be the northernmost section of Washington City. And this community by 1910 became the most affluent African American community in the country. So this becomes a multicultural community where really when you talk about something like the Harlem Renaissance, we're not talking about it starting in Harlem. We're talking about it starting along the U Street corridor. Washington was not a typical Southern city until a Southern president took office in 1913 and Woodrow Wilson Jim Crowed the city. So here in the greater U Street corridor, for example, there is literally, by bankers and the federal government as well being involved in this, there's literally a red line drawn on streets in saying you're going to keep the Negroes within these areas. D.C. was being geared up for a potential riot in the summer of 1968 because it was forecasted that a number of urban areas would have these kind of problems. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had scheduled to march on the Capitol April 22nd, 1968. But what they did not expect is something before April 22nd, 1968.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene.
But then you get some rocks through windows. You get a lot of streets being crowded with people talking about what had happened. And Stokely Carmichael tells some of them that are calling for action that if they don't have a gun, go home. And the next 3 days is utter chaos in Washington, D.C. Most of the action is occurring along the greater U Street corridor, down 14th Street to Columbia Heights, 7th Street down to Mount Vernon Square, and in Northeast, around Union Station, that area, down to Benning Road. But most of it's happening here in the greater U Street corridor. When the smoke is finally gone, about 424 businesses have been burned out. $24.5 million worth of damage. This whole concept of an urban revolution was to get rid of the influence of the bourgeoisie and the petty capitalists. Riots like what happened in 1968 were very successful because who were the victims? The petty capitalists who owned the businesses, the bourgeoisie that couldn't control the proletariat or the common folk. So in that way, one could say that it was very successful and it retarded the progress of the capitalist class in the African American community.